The sound of desperate pounding echoed through the thick wooden door of the root cellar, as Eleanor Andrews' bloodied knuckles struck again and again, in futile resistance. April 1876 had brought more than spring rains to the dusty plains of western Kansas. It had delivered her into darkness at the hands of her own family. "Let me out," Eleanor shouted, her voice growing hoarse after hours of screaming. "You cannot keep me here." Her older brother Thomas had dragged her down here at dawn, his face twisted with righteous fury when he discovered her plans to leave the family homestead. Their father, stone-faced and unyielding, had merely nodded his approval as Thomas locked the heavy door. "3 days to consider your sinful ways," her father had declared through the wooden barrier. "No daughter of mine abandons her family responsibilities for some foolish dream." Darkness enveloped her now as the last ray of light from the small ground-level window disappeared with the setting sun. The root cellar, typically used for storing potatoes and preserves through the harsh Kansas winters, had become her prison. Eleanor sank to the dirt floor, her light blue dress now smudged with grime, and wrapped her arms around herself against the evening chill. At 22, Eleanor had endured her father's increasingly controlling behavior since her mother's death 5 years prior. But his recent arrangement to marry her off to Jeremiah Wallace, a widower 30 years her senior with a reputation for cruelty, had pushed her to plan her escape. The stagecoach to Wichita would have departed that morning. From there, she had intended to take a train eastward to start a new life teaching in a proper school. Her teaching certificate, earned through correspondence courses and hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her bedroom, was her ticket to freedom. But Thomas had discovered her packed bag. Now darkness and the musty scent of earth surrounded her. Rodents scurried in the corners, making Eleanor draw her knees closer to her chest. The damp air clung to her skin as she leaned against a shelf of canned vegetables, trying to find some comfort on the hard, packed earthen floor. The distant sound of approaching hoofbeats pierced the night's quiet. Eleanor held her breath, listening. The Andrews homestead rarely received visitors, especially after nightfall. The rhythmic pounding grew louder before stopping abruptly, followed by the sound of a man's voice, unfamiliar and deep, exchanging words with her father. Though she strained to hear, Eleanor could only make out fragments of heated conversation. Her father's voice rose defensively, followed by the stranger's more insistent tone. Footsteps approached the root cellar, and Eleanor scrambled to her feet. "She ain't here," came her father's voice, closer now. "And even if she was, what business is it of yours, Cowboy, Mr. Andrews? I know what you've done." The stranger's voice was calm but carried an edge of steel. "The station master in town mentioned your daughter never arrived for her coach." People talk in small towns. Eleanor's heart raced. Someone had noticed her absence. "This is family business," her father snapped. "Now get off my property before I fetch my shotgun." A tense silence followed, broken by the sound of retreating footsteps. Eleanor's hope plummeted. Her mysterious potential savior was leaving. Then came the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. "Sir, I don't want trouble," the stranger's voice returned, steady and determined. "But I cannot in good conscience ride away knowing you've imprisoned your own daughter." Eleanor moved to the door, pressing her ear against the rough wood. "Help!" she cried out. "I'm down here." Heavy footfalls rushed toward the cellar door, followed by her father's shouts and her brother's angry voice joining the commotion. "Stand back, miss," the stranger called out. Eleanor retreated just as a tremendous crash shook the door. Once, twice on the third impact, the lock splintered and the door swung open, revealing a tall figure silhouetted against the night sky. The man stepped forward, holstering his revolver and extending a hand toward her. In the dim moonlight filtering through the open door, Eleanor saw a face weathered by sun and wind, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners despite his stern expression. He couldn't have been more than 28, dressed in the practical garb of a working cowboy, dusty denim, worn leather vest, and a Stetson pushed back on his head. "No one hides you again," he said firmly, his gaze never leaving hers as he helped her climb the earthen steps. Outside, her father and Thomas stood rigid with fury, but the stranger's drawn gun had evidently persuaded them against interference. Eleanor stepped into the cool night air, taking her first free breath in nearly 18 hours. "This is kidnapping," her father snarled. "She's my daughter." "She's a grown woman," the stranger countered, "free to make her own choices." Eleanor straightened her shoulders, finding courage in the cowboy's presence. "I'm leaving, father. I won't marry Jeremiah Wallace or anyone else of your choosing." Her father's face darkened. "Then you're no daughter of mine." The words stung, but Eleanor had expected them. "So be it." The stranger motioned toward his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion waiting patiently nearby. "Miss, if you're willing, I can escort you to town." Eleanor nodded, painfully aware of her disheveled appearance and the bruises forming on her wrists where Thomas had gripped her that morning. "You'll regret this," Thomas warned, taking a threatening step forward. The cowboy's hand moved to his holster, and Thomas froze. "The only regret here is that a man would lock his own kin in a hole in the ground." He turned to Eleanor. "Can you ride?" "Yes," she answered, summoning what dignity she could. He helped her mount behind him, and she hesitantly placed her hands at his waist. "Hold tight," he instructed. And with a click of his tongue, the horse set off at a trot down the moonlit path leading away from the only home Eleanor had ever known. As they put distance between themselves and the Andrews homestead, Eleanor finally asked, "Who are you?" "Why would you help a stranger?" He glanced back at her, his face half illuminated by moonlight. "Daniel Abernathy, madam. I ranch about 15 miles south. As for why—" He paused, his expression softening. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when good people stand by and do nothing." The rhythmic motion of the horse beneath them lulled Eleanor into a strange calm despite the tumultuous events of the day. "Thank you, Mr. Abernathy." "Daniel," he corrected gently. "And you're Miss Andrews, I presume?" "Eleanor," she replied, "though I suppose I'm not an Andrews anymore." "Sometimes," Daniel said thoughtfully. "The family we choose matters more than the one we're born to." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the vast Kansas sky stretching endlessly above them, stars scattered like diamond dust across the heavens. Eleanor felt the weight of 22 years lifting from her shoulders, with each hoofbeat carrying her toward freedom. "Where were you headed?" Daniel finally asked as they approached the small town of Cottonwood Springs, its few buildings dark except for the saloon which still glowed with lamplight. "Wichita," Eleanor answered. "And then east. I have a teaching certificate." Daniel nodded appreciatively. "That's admirable. Not many women out here have such education." "My mother insisted," Eleanor explained, her voice softening at the memory. "Before she passed, she taught me to read when I was 4 and made father promise I'd continue my studies." "A wise woman," Daniel commented. "The next stagecoach doesn't leave until tomorrow afternoon. Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" The question brought Eleanor crashing back to reality. She had no money. Her carefully saved funds were hidden in the bag she'd been forced to leave behind. Her plans, so meticulously crafted over months, had crumbled in an instant. I don't," she admitted, embarrassment coloring her voice. "My funds were in my bag at home." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Holloway runs a respectable boarding house. I know her well. She'd take you in and ask questions later." "I have nothing to pay her with," Eleanor said. the desperation of her situation sinking in. "Consider it an investment in a future schoolteacher," Daniel replied, guiding his horse toward a neat two-story house at the edge of town. Despite the late hour, Martha Holloway answered Daniel's knock with surprising alertness, her gray hair neatly tucked into a nightcap. Her shrewd eyes took in Eleanor's disheveled appearance without judgment. "Daniel Abernathy, bringing a young woman to my door at this hour," she remarked, though her tone held no real reproach. "There must be quite a story here." "One best told over breakfast, Mrs. Holloway," Daniel replied respectfully. "Miss Andrews needs safe lodging tonight." Mrs. Holloway needed no further explanation. She simply opened her door wider. "Come in, child. We'll get you settled." Eleanor turned to Daniel, suddenly reluctant to part from her rescuer. "How can I ever repay your kindness?" Daniel's smile was warm in the lamplight. "By living the life you choose, Miss Andrews. I'll call on you tomorrow before the stage departs." With those words, he tipped his hat and returned to his horse, disappearing into the night as Eleanor watched from the boarding-house doorway. Morning brought clarity and fresh challenges. After washing away the dirt of the cellar in a proper bath and changing into a simple dress borrowed from Mrs. Holloway's daughter, Eleanor faced her benefactress across the breakfast table. "Daniel explained some of your situation," Mrs. Holloway said, pouring coffee. "Your father's behavior was unconscionable." Eleanor nodded, still processing the events of the previous day. "I had been planning my departure for months. I never expected them to lock me away." "Men often fear what they cannot control," Mrs. Holloway observed wisely. "But now you must decide your next steps with a clear head." "I still wish to teach," Eleanor affirmed. "Though without my savings or certificate." "We'll figure something out," Mrs. Holloway assured her, patting her hand. "Daniel Abernathy is not a man who leaves things half done." As if summoned by his name, a knock sounded at the door. Daniel entered, hat in hand, looking more rested than the night before. In daylight, Eleanor noticed details she had missed: the way his sandy brown hair curled slightly at the collar of his clean shirt, the clear hazel of his eyes, the small scar that cut through his right eyebrow. "Good morning, ladies," he greeted them, accepting a cup of coffee from Mrs. Holloway. "I hope you slept well, Miss Andrews." "Better than expected," Eleanor admitted, "though I've been considering my situation." Daniel nodded, setting down his cup. "I took the liberty of riding out to your homestead at first light." Eleanor's eyes widened in alarm. "You went back there. Were you not concerned for your safety?" A smile tugged at the corner of Daniel's mouth. "Your father and brother were considerably more reasonable in daylight, with the sheriff accompanying me." "Sheriff Miller went with you?" Mrs. Holloway asked, surprised. "Once I explained the situation," Daniel confirmed. "We retrieved your belongings, Miss Andrews." He gestured toward the door, where Eleanor now noticed her carpetbag waiting, emotion welled in her throat. "My teaching certificate, still hidden exactly where you described, along with your savings," Daniel assured her. Sheriff Miller was quite clear about the legal rights of adult women to their own property. Relief washed over Eleanor. With her certificate and modest savings, her future plans remained viable. Yet something had shifted within her since the previous night, a hesitation she couldn't quite name. "The stagecoach leaves at 3, she said quietly. Daniel nodded, his expression unreadable. "I know." Mrs. Holloway, displaying the intuition of a woman who had seen many romances unfold under her roof, tactfully excused herself to attend to other boarders. Left alone in the parlor, Eleanor found herself studying Daniel more carefully. There was something about him, a steadiness, a quiet strength that drew her. In the harsh world of the frontier, such qualities were rare and precious. "Why did you help me?" she asked again, needing to understand. The truth this time. Daniel was silent for a long moment, turning his hat in his hands. 5 years ago, my sister found herself in a similar situation, trapped by a controlling husband who isolated her from everyone who cared about her. His jaw tightened. By the time I discovered what was happening, it was too late. She died from his mistreatment. Horror and sympathy washed over Eleanor. I'm so sorry. I swore I'd never again stand by when someone needed help, Daniel continued. When I overheard the station master in town mentioning that Hiram Andrews' daughter never showed up for her scheduled departure. Well, I know your father's reputation. Eleanor nodded slowly. So it was a matter of principle. Daniel's eyes met hers. At first, he admitted, but now. The unspoken words hung between them, charged with possibility. I have an alternative to suggest, Daniel finally said. The school teacher in Willow Creek, 20 miles south of my ranch, is leaving to get married next month. They'll need a replacement. Eleanor's heart quickened. Willow Creek. It's a growing community. Good people. They value education. Daniel leaned forward slightly. And it would mean you could stay in Kansas. The implication was clear, yet delicately presented. Eleanor studied him, this man who had broken down a door to rescue her without hesitation, who had respected her autonomy at every turn. Why would I want to stay in Kansas? She asked, her voice soft but direct. Daniel met her gaze steadily. Because I'd like the chance to court you properly, Miss Andrews, if you're amenable. The directness of his statement took her breath away. In a world where marriages were often arrangements of convenience or necessity, his honest declaration of interest with no pressure or expectation was refreshingly radical. We barely know each other, Eleanor pointed out, though her heart raced at the possibility. True, Daniel acknowledged with a slight smile. Which is why I'm suggesting Willow Creek. You'd have your independence, your teaching position. I'd call on you when appropriate. If after getting to know me, you decide I'm not to your liking, the stagecoach runs through town every Tuesday. Eleanor couldn't help but smile at his practical approach. You've thought this through. I've had since midnight, he admitted. Mrs. Holloway will vouch for my character, as would Sheriff Miller. I'm not a wealthy man, but my ranch is profitable and growing. I can provide references. The formality of his offer, coupled with the adventure in his eyes, charmed Eleanor more than flowery declarations might have. Here was a man who would respect her mind and her freedom, qualities her father had tried to stifle. I would need to interview for the position, she said carefully. Daniel's face brightened. The school board meets on Thursday. I could take you there, introduce you. Eleanor took a deep breath, weighing the unexpected turn her life had taken. The eastern cities still beckoned with their promise of civilization and refinement. Yet there was something compelling about this new path, a life where she could maintain her independence while exploring the connection that had sparked between them. Very well, Mr. Abernathy, she said formally, though her eyes danced. I shall interview in Willow Creek before making my final decision. Daniel's smile was like sunrise breaking across the plains. You won't regret it, Miss Andrews. The journey to Willow Creek revealed a side of Kansas that Eleanor had never appreciated during her sheltered life on her father's homestead. The rolling prairies, dotted with wildflowers after spring rains, stretched toward distant horizons where earth met sky in a watercolor blend of gold and blue. Daniel proved to be a knowledgeable guide, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the region's settlement. His own ranch, the Lazy A, lay in a fertile valley with good access to water crucial in the sometimes harsh Kansas climate. My father started with just 40 acres and 10 head of cattle, he explained as they traveled. He built it to 500 acres before he passed. I've added another 300 since then. "You've accomplished much for a young man," Eleanor observed. Daniel shrugged modestly. "I had help. My foreman, Hank, has been with us since I was a boy, and neighboring ranchers look out for each other. Has to be that way out here." That community spirit extended to Willow Creek itself, Eleanor discovered. Unlike the rough cattle towns that had earned Kansas its wild reputation, Willow Creek was a family settlement. A proper church stood alongside the schoolhouse, and the general store carried not just necessities but books and simple luxuries that spoke of permanence and civilized aspirations. The school board, consisting of the store owner, the preacher, and two prosperous farmers, interviewed Eleanor with respectful thoroughness. Her certificate impressed them, as did her articulate responses to their questions about teaching methods. "We have 28 children enrolled, ages 6 to 16, explained Mrs. Peterson, the merchant's wife who had been acting as temporary teacher. "They're eager learners, though the older boys sometimes need a firm hand during planting and harvest seasons when they'd rather be working the fields." Eleanor nodded, familiar with the rhythms of agricultural life. Education must work alongside practical needs, but not be subordinated to them entirely. Her response pleased the board members, who exchanged approving glances. "There's a small cottage behind the schoolhouse for the teacher's use," Reverend Barnes explained. "Simple but comfortable. The position pays $30 monthly, plus the dwelling." It was a modest salary, but with housing provided, it would allow Eleanor to save and maintain her independence, exactly what she had dreamed of. "When could you begin?" asked Mr. Johnson, a wheat farmer with 3 school-age children. "The 1st of May, if that suits," Eleanor replied, her heart quickening at the realization that this was actually happening. "Very well," Reverend Barnes said with a smile. "Welcome to Willow Creek, Miss Andrews." Outside the meeting house, Daniel waited, trying and failing to hide his anticipation. When Eleanor emerged with a broad smile, his face lit up. "Congratulations, Miss Andrews," he said, offering his arm as they walked toward the small restaurant where they would celebrate with dinner. "Willow Creek has gained an excellent teacher." "Thank you for bringing me here," Eleanor replied, suddenly shy in the face of what this decision meant for them both. "It feels right somehow." Over the next 4 weeks, as April yielded to May and Eleanor settled into her teaching position, Daniel called on her with proper regularity. Sunday afternoons typically found them walking along Willow Creek itself, for which the town was named, or sharing tea on the small porch of her teacher's cottage. Their courtship progressed with a natural ease that surprised Eleanor, who had always viewed romantic relationships with skepticism, largely due to her parents' strained marriage. Daniel never pressed for commitments or made demands on her time. Instead, he shared stories of his life, listened attentively to her thoughts, and gradually revealed the depth of his character. "My students asked if you were my beau today," Eleanor confessed one Sunday in late May as they strolled along the creek bank, wildflowers bobbing in the gentle breeze. Daniel's eyebrows rose in amusement. "And what did you tell them?" "That it wasn't proper to discuss such matters in the classroom," Eleanor replied primly, though her lips twitched with suppressed laughter. "Very professional," Daniel approved, his eyes crinkling. After a moment's hesitation, he added, "Though I would be honored if you did consider me your beau, Miss Andrews." Eleanor stopped walking, turning to face him directly. In the golden afternoon light, with meadowlarks singing in the nearby grasses, she studied the face that had become increasingly dear to her. "I believe I do, Mr. Abernathy," she said softly. The joy that transformed his features was worth every moment of uncertainty she had faced since that night in the root cellar. Daniel took her hand gently in his, raising it to his lips in a gesture that managed to be both respectful and thrillingly intimate. "Eleanor," he said, using her given name for the first time, "you have brought sunshine into my life that I never expected to find." The sincerity in his voice moved her deeply. "As have you into mine, Daniel." Their first kiss, when it came moments later, was gentle and questioning a promise rather than a demand. Eleanor found herself responding with a certainty that surprised her hands resting lightly on his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Daniel's expression was one of wonder. "I've been wanting to do that since I first saw you climb out of that cellar," he admitted. Eleanor laughed softly. "Even covered in dirt and looking half wild." "Especially then," he confirmed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Your courage took my breath away." Summer brought long, sun-drenched days as their courtship deepened. Eleanor thrived in her teaching position, earning the respect of parents and the devotion of her students. Daniel's ranch prospered under his careful management, and he began building in addition to his house a library with large windows to capture the morning light. "For your books," he explained when he first showed her the plans. "Every proper home needs a library." The thoughtfulness of the gesture, his acknowledgement of her love for learning and literature, touched Eleanor deeply. It represented everything she had come to cherish about Daniel: his respect for her mind, his support of her independence, his desire to build something meaningful together. In July, word reached Willow Creek that Jeremiah Wallace, the man Eleanor's father had intended her to marry, had died following a drunken fall from his horse. The news brought complicated emotions. While Eleanor felt no personal grief for a man she had actively feared, the event forced her to confront her estrangement from her family. "Do you ever think of reconciling with them?" Daniel asked gently as they discussed it on her porch one evening. Eleanor sighed, watching fireflies begin their nightly dance over the meadow. "I've written 3 letters, all returned unopened." Daniel covered her hand with his. "I'm sorry." "Perhaps someday," Eleanor said, trying to sound hopeful. "But I won't sacrifice the life I'm building for their approval." "The life you're building," Daniel repeated thoughtfully. "May I ask where you see that life heading, Eleanor?" The directness of the question made her heart skip. They had been courting for nearly 3 months now, and while neither had spoken explicitly of marriage, the possibility had been an undercurrent in their relationship from the beginning. "I see myself continuing to teach," she began carefully. "I love my students, and there's such satisfaction in watching them learn and grow." Daniel nodded encouragingly. "And beyond teaching," Eleanor met his gaze steadily, "I see a partnership with a man who values me as an equal, a home filled with books and conversation, perhaps children of our own someday." The vulnerability of this admission hung between them. Daniel's expression softened as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. "I've been carrying this for 2 weeks," he confessed, waiting for the right moment. He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring, a small pearl set between 2 tiny diamonds. "It was my mother's. She made me promise to give it only to a woman of substance and character." Eleanor's breath caught as Daniel slid from his chair to one knee before her. "Eleanor Andrews, you are the bravest, most principled woman I've ever known. From the moment I broke down that cellar door, I've been falling in love with you. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes as the full circle of her journey became clear. From imprisonment to true freedom, not just freedom from her father's control, but freedom to choose a life partner who would cherish rather than dominate her. "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly, "Yes, Daniel. I would be proud to be your wife." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the pearl gleaming in the last light of sunset, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that the unexpected detour her life had taken that April night had led her precisely where she belonged. Their wedding took place in October, when the prairie grasses had turned golden and the harvest was complete. The entire community of Willow Creek gathered to celebrate, along with ranchers from miles around who had come to respect Daniel Abernathy's integrity and fair dealings. Eleanor wore a gown of ivory silk ordered from Kansas City, with sprigs of late-blooming wildflowers in her hair. As she walked down the aisle of the small church on the arm of Sheriff Miller, who had happily agreed to give her away, she caught sight of two unexpected figures at the back of the church. Her father and Thomas stood awkwardly in their Sunday best, uncertainty written across their weathered faces. Eleanor faltered briefly, then continued toward Daniel, who waited for her with shining eyes beside Reverend Barnes. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion and promise. When Reverend Barnes pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel's kiss was both tender and certain a pledge of the partnership they were beginning. At the reception held in the town square, Eleanor finally approached her father and brother, Daniel steadfast beside her. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said quietly. Her father looked older, the lines in his face deeper than she remembered. "Didn't expect to come," he admitted gruffly, "but your mother would have wanted it." It wasn't an apology, but from Hiram Andrews it was as close as one might ever get. Eleanor nodded, accepting the olive branch for what it was. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. Thomas cleared his throat uncomfortably. "You look happy, Ellie." "I am," she confirmed, feeling Daniel's supportive presence beside her. "Your husband," her father began, glancing at Daniel with a mixture of wariness and grudging respect. "He's built something worthwhile. That counts for something." Daniel extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Hiram Andrews took it. No further words were exchanged, but a fragile bridge had been established, one that might, with time and care, bear the weight of reconciliation. Later, as twilight descended and lanterns illuminated the dancing area, Daniel led Eleanor in their first waltz as husband and wife. "Are you happy?" he asked softly, his hand warm against the small of her back. Eleanor looked up at the man who had literally broken down barriers to free her, who had given her choices when others sought to take them away. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "Though I never imagined when I planned my escape that I'd find my freedom and my heart's desire in the same place." Daniel smiled, the same smile that had first given her courage in the moonlight outside the root cellar. "No one hides you again," he repeated his first words to her. "Not even from happiness." As they danced beneath the star-filled Kansas sky, Eleanor Andrews Abernathy knew that the darkness of that April night had led her, ultimately, into the brightest light she had ever known, the light of being truly seen, valued, and loved for exactly who she was.